Everybody, and welcome to the Koinos podcast, which is all about helping people turn their passions into their livelihoods with freedom technology. Today, I'm here with Justin Welch, the CEO of Kollection. Hey, Justin, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, Andrew, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So why don't we start by talking about Kollection with a K. What is Kollection?
So Kollection is an NFT marketplace built on the Koinos blockchain. And we're not just building any marketplace. We're trying to build the best marketplace in all of Web3, not just one on Koinos. But we believe that the inherent features of Koinos, in fact that it's feeless and easy to develop on, are some of the things that are going to allow us to actually accomplish that goal. Another thing that allows us to accomplish that goal is an incredibly strong team that works really well together. So we're really lucky to all get connected about a year and a half ago because we each bring a unique skill set to the project. I think without all of those skill sets, we wouldn't be where we're at today. There's certainly some challenges with that, namely that we're all spread across the world. You know, a Kollection is a team of 4 people, including myself, and we're all in different countries. We're all in different time zones. So that can certainly be a challenge, but we've made it work. We have regular meetings, usually at least once a week, face to face, regular communication the rest of the time.
So you mentioned free to use, the free to use aspect of Koinos. Is that why you decided to build Kollection on Koinos, or were there other reasons?
No, absolutely not. So the reason I was actually interested in building Kollection was not because I was interested in building a marketplace product. I actually wanted to build a game. I had a game concept that I wanted to build on Koinos. But in order for that to really work, we needed to have NFTs on Koinos. And we needed to have a marketplace for those NFTs on Koinos. And that really highlighted the need for something that I believe is really core infrastructure. Like it's not just a product, it's something that Koinos needed as a whole. Both the open source NFT marketplace contracts, so anyone could launch whatever they want, and the marketplace to be able to launch and sell those. So that's actually why I built Kollection. In fact, it's so interesting of a story. I actually never bought an NFT before in my life until we built the marketplace on Koinos to be able to do that. So I actually bought my first NFT on Kollection, which I think is rather hilarious. Like NFTs were not historically my thing. Like, and here I am, I'm the NFT guy, which is not who I really wanted to be, but I think it's who I needed to be because we needed this. Like with this, Koinos needs this product. So that's why it's here. That's why we're doing what we're doing.
So what attracted you to building on Koinos, or what you wanted to build on Koinos, was actually a game. So is it fair to say that you think Koinos is uniquely suited to game development, and then through that lens, you were like, oh, you know what a game on Koinos will need? It'll need NFTs. I now understand the role that these assets play and the importance that they're going to play in future applications.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Koinos is definitely uniquely suited to game development, and primarily because it's free to use. Like, you know, if you look at any average phone game, like that's a clicker and people are constantly clicking all the time, you know, just imagine if every one of those clicks was a blockchain transaction, which it might be in some games. And if it were, you know, even if it costs you, even if it was cheap transaction fees, even if it was like 1 penny for every click, how often do you think people would be clicking that? Probably not very often. Like, you know, it needs to be free. You need to be able to constantly do this. So aside from that, I think it's uniquely suited to game development because it's relatively easy to develop on. You know, we don't have to pool developers like existing Web3 developers over from Ethereum. Like that's not I feel like on Koinos, that's not who we're trying to attain. We're not trying to get this existing Web3 developer user base, or developer base rather. We're trying to get all developers, you know, ones that know JavaScript, TypeScript, like average things that developers do. And since that's exactly what you use to develop smart contracts on Koinos, it's a whole lot easier to obtain them.
So I feel like this is a pretty good segue into, the mission behind the podcast, helping people turn their passions into their livelihoods. Is it just game developers that you see Koinos helping, or Kollection specifically? How do you see Kollection helping people achieve that objective?
Yeah, of course not. Yeah, game development's just one thing. So, what interests me most about NFTs is very unique utility. And one very unique utility example would be something like real estate, like NFTs that represent fractional pieces of real estate. Like, imagine if you could do that. And what if that piece of real estate also generated revenue, like, renting out apartments to people in an apartment building, for example. And then all of that revenue could be automatically distributed in an entirely decentralized way to everyone who owns one of those NFTs that represents a fractional piece of that real estate. Now, a lot of things would have to happen before we get there. Of course, those things have to be built into local and regional laws wherever they happen to happen. But I think Koinos is uniquely suited for that piece as well, simply because you can freely make those distributions to everyone. Like, that's actually a problem on other chains. Like, let's say, if it's a few people, okay, maybe not a big deal. But let's say there's thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who have all bought into this asset, and you need to make automatic on-chain distributions to all of them. You really can't do that unless the chain is free to use. So that's one way it's really suited for that. Now, I think, something like that, we're obviously probably years away before we see a product like that really take off and get use, namely just because of laws and stuff, and actually rolling that into the real world.
But real estate in a game, probably
sure,
a step closer.
Right? Yeah, I could start with that, right? And that's how we build that kind of technology. It's interesting. Like, a lot of things start with game development technology, like AI today. Like think about it. So in every Tesla that's driving out on the road, there's NVIDIA graphics cards. That's actually what's being used to visualize the road in real time and process that data. It's all these other AI products, ChatGPT, etc. All that runs, the reason that works is because of, once again, NVIDIA graphics cards that were actually built to display graphics in video games. But here we are, and it turns out that's also really useful for all these real world things. So you're absolutely right. Like, a real estate game on a blockchain might be how that technology starts getting developed. Like, that makes a ton of sense. That helps lay the framework for that type of stuff to come out. So
yeah, I feel like all the interesting use cases people have pointed out over the years really only work with a free to use chain. And that was something that we saw a lot. For anybody who's watching who doesn't know, Justin and I and the other Koinos founders and Koinos Group founders all worked together at Steemit. And Steem was the first feeless blockchain. It was a social blockchain. And so we've been thinking about the potential for a gas-free or a gasless chain for a long time. And whenever anybody would come up with an interesting use case, like something remotely tied to the real world, it would always be like, how would that work if there were gas fees? And it would be like, it just doesn't. With a real estate distribution, like you were talking about, or another example I personally like is giving me ownership and control of my medical records. So like a medical record storage application. And the interesting thing is, like the real estate example that you brought up, these are often use cases where time is not of the essence. Like, if you're shooting out this distribution of profits or something, it's like, yeah, I just want my monthly distribution. It doesn't have to be this second. It can be 60 seconds from now. And so you can just put the transactions through and optimize them for mana, and everything gets out, and it's low cost and no fee. Whereas on a gas-based blockchain, sure, you can try to minimize your gas fees, but you're not going to get rid of them. So, Kollection, what is the most exciting feature that you guys have coming up?
So, all right. So before I talk about the most exciting feature we have coming up, I think it's important to rewind because we actually just released a lot of stuff recently, and a lot of that ties into a total product we're calling Creator Tools, we're releasing in phases. Like we're actually going to release that in 3 phases. So it makes the most sense if I describe what that's like in its 3rd phase when it finally releases. So when that finally releases, Creator Tools, what that's going to mean is that anyone, anywhere, any creator can go and create a collection on the Koinos blockchain without using any code, without having to have any technical ability, and without even having to hold any tokens. And I think that's extremely empowering for creators. They can just log in, they can, gather all their information, fill in all the details, and all the legwork for everything. And launching that collection is just done automatically for them and with no fees. So, and that's something that really doesn't exist yet. There's some products that are kind of masquerading as that elsewhere, like on OpenSea and other marketplaces. But really how those work is they're not even launched on chain. Like, they fill in everything, and at the first sale, all those fees for launching the collection and the transaction fees are actually taken immediately from the first buyer. Like that's not free, and that's not really very scalable, and that doesn't work very well. And it's really not going to work well when Ethereum reaches a really high market cap. So I think that's one thing that really sets us apart here is we can actually launch those things on chain with no fee in a completely decentralized way, which I also think is really important. So back to Creator Tools. So that's 3 phases. That's what it looks like in the final phase. So the phase we just released, phase 1, is a feature that allows collections to actually mint their NFTs on the collection site. And we just saw that this week with the Chess Gambit Club collection. And I think that's really cool because now you can fill in all your information like team details, frequently asked questions, your website data, everything. Get a fancy user interface, shows how many things have already been minted. Easy button, 1-click minting, goes straight to your wallet. You can do it right there. So that was a big hurdle to cross. It was really nice and feels good to finally get that out the door. Another piece of that in phase 1 that we just released too was supporting additional asset format types like 3D objects. Like these Chess Gambit Club pieces are actually real 3D objects. You can load them up and you can, move your mouse around and look at the underside of them and everything, which is really cool. And that's also really cool if it comes to game integration or like metaverse integration or whatever you want to use those NFTs with. So I think it opens the door for additional utility with NFTs. So to be honest, the upcoming feature that I'm currently most excited about is actually not necessarily Creator Tools. Like, yes, it's really, really exciting to get to that point where, anyone can launch a collection that easily. But the truth is, we need more and more users in the door on Koinos for that to be a really great usable product. That's just my opinion. Maybe that's something that brings in the users too. But, once we get to a critical mass of people interested in the Koinos blockchain, that also brings all those creators. And if we already have those tools for them to easily be able to launch their projects, that's going to be great. And I think we'll accomplish that before we get to that point. But the feature I'm honestly the most interested in is auctions and bidding. And I think we might actually wind up getting that out prior to the final phase of Creator Tools. I think that's a need that we have right now. There's a number of collections that I've been talking to, other projects elsewhere, and that's a feature they're wanting to exist and be here before they launch. They're actually waiting on this feature, and I think it makes sense to focus on the thing where there's already projects that want to come in and use this thing. So why not focus on
customer demand?
Their issue is not. Yeah, it's not contract development. If contract development is the bottleneck in the process, then of course, Creator Tools phase 3 would need to be the focus. But I think it's the opposite. We need to focus on the tools that people need right then in order to launch their projects. So that's what I'm most excited about. We have a lot of other things that we've talked about internally that we haven't discussed publicly yet. So there is a lot of potential really exciting things on the collection internal roadmap, and we'll definitely talk more about those as it makes sense to do that. I definitely don't want to make promises and timelines that we can't keep to, so I'm pretty reluctant to put those ideas out there, unless it's just to get a general consensus on how people feel about them. But
But
yeah,
you are
super
thinking
exciting stuff.
ahead. You are actually.
Oh yeah, yeah, we're totally thinking. Yeah, it's not just this. It's not just like auction bidding, creator tools phase 3 done. Like no, it's never done, right?
Yeah.
It's just like a good game. A good game is never finished developing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So why would Kollection ever be finished being developed too?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much left to do, but you always want to be balancing that with what customers actually want and people actually want. And I'm super excited about auctions as well. That would definitely be that's the feature I'm looking forward to most, in part because I had a conversation with the Eve NFT people, and we are kind of talking things through. And I was like, "Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that?" And it basically came down to, well, we can't do auctions. We can't do what you're asking. I'm like, you
Right?
choose this price. Why didn't you choose a lower price and let people bid it up? They're like, that you can't do that. I'm like,
You
oh,
can't do
that's a
that. Yeah,
really
yeah.
important feature. So it makes perfect
Right.
sense to me. And I think a lot of what we're doing, it's funny. It's like a lot of what we're doing is opening up creative space for people, and then
Hmm.
giving them the opportunity to feel like they have some big upside potential, because the upside potential is there, right? But then you have to give them the tools to give them the access to that upside potential. So like when you think about bidding, when you think about the possibility, okay, so I can launch these tokens at X price and maybe people buy them, maybe people don't, versus I can launch them with a baseline of this price, but maybe people pay more. Maybe people love one versus the other and they go even higher. And so I totally get it. And the truth is that there will be those cases where people do overbid or competitively bid for this stuff, and those examples will show people, oh, I can make that much money off of this thing and off of this idea. So love that feature. It makes perfect sense to me, and I actually think it'll be huge, and I think that it probably should come before the creator tools, because you want people to see the success stories and then
Hmm.
have the tools they need to attempt to replicate those success stories. And success stories is a major theme for us, and for this year. And showcasing success stories, I think, is something we want to do as a community over the course of 2024, is foster success stories, and then promote them and showcase them. So how do you see Koinos evolving? Where do you want Koinos to go over the next year, 5 years, as somebody developing what is essentially critical infrastructure for Koinos?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So here's where I think where we're headed with this is, and this is just my opinion, and I think eventually we all need to come to a group consensus, same opinion. But I feel like right now there's going to be a big shift to Koinos being kind of an entrepreneur's chain instead of just a developer's chain. And I think the reason for that is because of the fact that you can spin up new concepts, new Web3 concepts with very low risk. And you can potentially onboard people outside of crypto with these types of ideas too, because, of course, free to use, you can supply the mana for them, and they don't even have to buy a token to use it. There's a lot of ideas that could be attempted with that. Not all of them will succeed, but a lot of them will. And a lot of people are going to want to try this. And the people with those ideas are actually the entrepreneurs and not necessarily the developers. Sometimes they're both, but there's lots of ideas people. There's never a shortage of that. But when people realize that you can spin up those ideas here with very low risk, I think that entrepreneurs will flock to it. So as we're building this like kind of core infrastructure stuff on Koinos, which I think we're getting pretty close to, we're starting to get to, feature parity of other chains, but of course also with these interesting aspects like no gas fees, that, entrepreneurs can pool developers outside of the crypto industry to Koinos. That's another thing. Like if you're someone with just a tiny bit of capital and a strong idea, it's going to be a whole lot easier to go get, random existing developers that maybe don't even work in Web3 and though TypeScript, JavaScript, C++, whatever, instead of like these Ethereum Solidity developers. So that's one thing that's going to be very interesting to those entrepreneurs. It's going to be easier to pool that development talent and probably attain it at a lower cost for them, to be honest, too. So I think that's kind of where we're headed. And some of the things that are going to help us get there are probably non-obvious, or maybe they are obvious, but like simple things like even better documentation that we have and developer tooling. So that way, when those entrepreneurs come and they find this external developer talent that knows nothing of Web3, you can really easily onboard them into your project and get them to accomplish your goals. So I think that's where we're kind of headed with this. Once we get there, like once that becomes commonplace, that there's lots of entrepreneurs that are trying out new things, trying to develop stuff on Koinos because it's easy and low risk, then it'll become a household name in the tech industry. That's how that starts. Like Koinos becomes kind of like, in a lot of people's minds, a tech company. It's not a tech company because it's not a company at all. It's a blockchain that nobody owns. But the point remains the same. That's how people from the outside world will see it. Now, when it becomes a household name is when one of those apps that one of these entrepreneurs spins up has extreme success. If you keep throwing things at the wall, eventually something sticks. Like, as this is repetitive, some of those entrepreneurs will have really big success and people will know the apps and they'll know Koinos is how you use those apps. And that's when it becomes a household name. So I think that's kind of the timeline, the way I see it, how this all unfolds and kind of the steps of how we actually get there.
Yeah, that's a really interesting answer that I totally didn't see coming, but I think it makes perfect sense. Like we were talking about before we started recording, we're in the weird position of having a fairly complete product. Koinos is pretty great the way that it is. And it's super accessible to developers, but we need the entrepreneurs here. We need people, and we have a great developer community. We have people who want to build stuff on Koinos and who have fairly deep knowledge of Koinos. And I feel like there's a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs to come in and tap into an existing pool of developers who like building things, but don't view themselves as entrepreneurs and don't enjoy the things that entrepreneurs enjoy doing. So I think that's totally right. So what are you saying that we need to think about how we're going to attract those entrepreneurs? And I mean, I've often thought like we need a way of matching entrepreneurs and developers. But I agree with your point about documentation and tooling. I think step one for this year is dramatically improve documentation. And I can say Koinos Group in probably about 2 months plans to shift focus to documentation as a major priority. Yeah. Easing those barriers to entry even further, so that when an entrepreneur, when a human looks at Koinos and says, oh, it's a free to use blockchain, that idea that I've been playing with, or this new idea that just popped into my head, oh, that might be possible now. Oh, let me share this with my developer friend. Let me go in and look at the documentation and see if this is doable. We don't want them bouncing. We got to decrease the bounce rate. Start by decreasing the bounce rate there. Is that the key? I guess that's basically what you said.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and I tend to agree with that too. Yeah, so So over time, we'll focus on ways to onboard those entrepreneurs. I think we can figure that all out together, like as a community. And then we will want some way to make it even easier to link those entrepreneurs with the existing developer pool talent on Koinos as well. The final step that we really want to get to, though, is, and we'll do this through documentation and tutorials and things like that, is entrepreneurs also being able to pool development talent from outside the world of Koinos. In the meantime, though, yeah, if someone wants to launch an idea, hey, come talk to us. There's a lot of great developers on Koinos today. Like, it can't hurt to come toss your idea around, and maybe somebody wants to help you go ahead and launch that today. So don't wait. If you got a good idea and you want to try it, hey, let's get it done.
I also feel like people come in to the process with a lot of baggage, and they assume that in a way it's going to be a lot more complicated and difficult than it really is. And I feel like there's a tendency to A, overcomplicate things, and B, not leverage something that you touched on, which is how easy it is to just prototype something, just spin up a smart contract and see what people think, especially now with Kollection getting to where it's at as far as the user interface and stuff like that. But like, I was even thinking the other day, somebody was talking about a kind of game. I guess I shouldn't reveal too much details, but I was thinking about the NFTs, and it's like, I think people are like, okay, I have this idea for a game, use an NFT series. You're smiling. What do you know where I'm going with this or something?
No.
And I'm like, and I feel like there's this tendency to be like, okay, I need an AI to generate all these different images and all that. And in my head, I'm just like, why don't you just spin up the smart contract and be like, here's what the metadata says. Are you interested in this metadata? Are you interested in this kind of game that maybe plays this metadata against that metadata? And like, MVP this stuff.
Yeah. It can't hurt. It can't hurt just to get stuff out there. I feel like that's the best way to try things out, is get and when we say MVP, we mean actual minimum viable products, not like, tons of iterations, before you even mention it to people. Like, get it out there and see if people like it. Like, if people like your concept, then it'll take off, and then you'll be able to continue developing it. And if it turns out they don't like your idea, drop it. Move on to the next thing. Like, don't waste too much time there. There's no reason to. But you're right. A lot of people's ideas are probably a lot easier to try than they.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people come in and they're like, I want to do this thing, and it's this really like complicated thing. And it's like, stop thinking about the smart contracts and just think about what problem you're trying to solve, and then we'll tell you what the smart contract looks like. And yeah. So, what do you think about this theory?
It's funny. I even said that today. Like, that was a response comment to a thing. It's like, you see this wall of text of ideas that boils down to this little idea, and it's like, okay, cool. I'll launch that for you if you want to do it. Like, it's that easy. Seriously, are you ready to launch this thing?
Right.
It's like, okay, well, maybe you're not that serious then.
Yeah, totally. And I think we feel the same way too. It's like Steve and Michael. It's like, yes, they are the architects of the blockchain. Yes, they are single-handedly building Koinos Pro. If there was a great idea for an NFT or some other token, they could probably bang it out in about an hour. So
right.
because of that skill set, or maybe you could do it faster or whatever. But if it's like this truly great idea, that the smart contract is actually not the hard part. And
as we see more and more successful projects launch, it'll get people's wheels turning, and they'll start fitting their ideas into that type of context. So, and then that will be the problem that we have to solve. And I can't wait till we get there. So.
Interesting. All right. So for anybody watching, what should they do next? Kollection.app?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you want to check out Kollection, it's at kollection.app. That's Kollection with a K.
Perfect. All right, man. Thanks so much for the conversation today, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.